Welcome back to DePIN State. I'm your host, Nik Hawks. This is sponsored by Hawks and Associates. On today's episode, we have Ayush, the co-founder over at Huddle01. This episode is sponsored by Hawks and Associates, the most experienced deep consultancy in the space. We help projects develop strategy, messaging, and token incentives. We'll have a little bit more on them later in the show. Before we get started, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and bell. That helps us bring great guests like Ayush to you. Ayush, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Nik. Great to be here, and it was great meeting you at DePIN Summit back in 2023.
Yeah, that was a really cool thing that Sal and Mahesh put on. So for folks who haven't seen you or Huddle01 before, let's start off with the basics. Who are you and how did you get here?
Yeah, so I'm Ayush. I'm one of the co-founder of Huddle01. I started Huddle01 with my co-founder Sushmit. We are two co-founders. We're from same university back in India, Jaipur. We studied together, known each other for the last 7 years. And both of us are technical in nature. I did electrical engineering, Sushmit did computer science. And then we got together in ETH Global Hackerfest 2020. That's where a global hackathon online was happening. It was a 30-day hackathon. And we realized that, hey, let's build something cool together. Sushmit was essentially had built India's first decentralized exchange and was working sold it to CoinDCX and was working at CoinDCX as a principal engineer. I, on the other hand, had done a lot of work on growth side and was going for my master's in behavioral economics in Scotland. But then COVID happened and I had a lot of time to basically play around and do this hackathon together. And that's where when I and Sushmit saw that, hey, everybody's talking about decentralization, Web 3.0. That was a term new back then in 2020. And we realized that, but all the meetings were happening over Zoom, Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. So we realized that, hey, this is a bit funny that we talk about decentralization, everything is happening over something where things like Zoom bombings are happening. And that's where we leveraged WebRTC protocol and essentially built a kind of infrastructure which basically can build the communication in a much more private, much more performant manner. So we built an app which was called Cadbury back then, which was completely peer-to-peer. You looked better there. It was much 1080 quality. Your recordings are happening over IPFS. You can store it over Filecoin. Completely, your recordings belong to you. And it blew up in the hackathon. We won the hackathon, and from one post that it was hocus pocus. Now we are a team of 33 people, raised around $5 million so far, and we have built the app layer, which looks like Zoom, but completely Web3. We have built an SDK layer, which means 5 lines of code, and you can integrate app into your own basically devices in less than 5 lines of code. So all the apps on Lens you are seeing who requires an audio spaces can just use our SDK, and bam, you can have audio spaces in your own apps. And the third is the end game of Huddle01, which is the network. That means instead of using an AWS, you can have your own node provider at your own home, and you can power the call of audio video, which belongs completely to you, and you essentially get all the value out of it. So that's what we are building, and it solves a couple of things from performance to economy. That means the bottom of economy at the end of the day, and you also get a much better privacy. So essentially, if we think about it in terms of the history that between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, the way why Homo sapiens won that war was because they were able to communicate better. So for humans to also solve these bigger problems of climate change and all the others, we need to make sure that our communication becomes much more immersive rather than this 2D screen on which we are communicating right now. To do that, you need to change infrastructure. And that's what we're here to build.
Got it. Okay. So there was a ton in there. You and I have talked a little bit about this, so I think I caught most of it, but let's go through some of those points step by step and make it a little bit more broken down to understand. So we'll start off with the common question that I get about Huddle01. I've used it over at Crystal Crew, super cool thing, is what is the difference between Huddle01 and Zoom? Are they competitors? Are they just doing different things? Is one doing something the other isn't doing? Kind of walk me through the difference between those two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we get this question a lot, that why should we use Zoom, Huddle01, why shouldn't we use Zoom? I think the answer to that question is that we are not competing with Zoom head on. Essentially, we are building a network. Zoom is a kind of platform. We are a kind of network. The difference between us is that we are basically built in a manner where we can support apps like Zoom on top of us. So you can build apps like Zoom, Microsoft Teams using our infrastructure at the end of the day. And you don't need to require an AWS server or a GCP to run these kind of communications which are happening. So why we built basically the demand side, that means we also have an app layer which looks like Zoom. We also have an SDK layer which looks like Agora, and we also have a network layer. But why we built all these three things together is because when you're building anything new right now in terms of a network, who will use your network if you don't build something yourself? And that's where we built our own demand side to make sure that people can basically use Huddle01 as a product. They can touch it, they can feel it, they can have it on iOS store, they can have it on Play Store, and they can just feel it completely. And it's completely powered by our own infrastructure. And that's how basically we bootstrap demand. So
Right.
that's how Huddle01 is. That means over time, Zoom can essentially use Huddle01's infrastructure. But at the face of it right now, Zoom is a kind of Web2 product. That means you cannot do token gated meetings. You cannot store your recordings over IPFS and Filecoin. You get 1 GB of recording for free. That's it over cloud. At Huddle01, you get hundreds of GBs at free because you can use IPFS and you can also store it on Filecoin. You can essentially do multi live streaming at Huddle01 for a creator like me or for you and anyone who basically wants to live stream your call. You can do in one click on X, on Twitch, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. In one click, you can just do a blast of live streaming using Huddle01 on basically Zoom. You can just do it on one platform that was on only on YouTube at once. So these are a couple of interesting differences which we have on the platform layer and also how we are a kind of network layer as well.
Got it. Okay, so one of the easiest entry points for folks watching this is they could use Huddle01 pretty easily with either a wallet address or they can just log in with a guest network. So you're not requiring kind of Web3 knowledge, because you can have it and it makes it probably a little bit better, but you don't have to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just go there, log in, you just go to start meeting, click on it. If you have MetaMask, great. If you don't, again, great. You can just enter the call, you can have a good call. And the best thing is that you have a very good audio and video quality. That means even my mother can use it right now. But if you're using a MetaMask, it becomes better as an icing on the cake because now you can essentially just switch off a video and you can use your NFT as an avatar there. That means you can have a much more, if you are just switching off, it doesn't feel like just my alphabet A is sitting there. It feels like any of the NFTs which you have, you can just play around with that at the
Right.
end of the day. And even if let's suppose you have a kind of very cool NFT collection like Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, you can have a specialized call in which only people who have Bored Apes can enter the call and no one else can. So that's how people use it. If you have Pudgy Penguin community can have their own custom subdomain and can enter the call, have a good gala time, and they can just live stream the call to tease people that, hey, this is how fun we are having. And they can also say that, hey, if you want to have fun here, you can just basically buy Pudgy Penguins and all those things. So basically that's how you can have these community-based things on top of Huddle01 platform. So yeah, that's how it is different because of these crypto primitives, which makes it possible to do these kind of interesting things like NFT gated content, IPFS-based recordings, and all the other things which are possible.
Right. And that starts to get more and more interesting as we just see Web3 kind of permeate through more and more of society. Is that right now it's kind of a fun thing to do. We did it on the Gristle crew where we said, hey, here's, make sure I get your wallet address, or here's how to sign into this thing. We used it. It was pretty cool. We could do some of the was it not white label, but we put the little Gristle crew thing up there. Like it was a pretty cool experience to do that, and definitely different than what we could do with Zoom. One thing we went past a little bit quickly is, how is this better than current architecture? I think most of us are used to thinking like, well, AWS is the fastest and the best and the mostest. Like, how could you possibly be better than that? Walk me through how you guys are thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is again going back to 2020. That's when it all started, when we did the hackathon. So if you think about it, that's where COVID happened. In COVID, everybody was forced to sit at home, and especially for children who were in schools, they had to just do all the classes using Zoom. But interestingly, in India, what we saw was a very interesting trend where people used to use Zoom, but in tandem with WhatsApp. Essentially, the latency was so high that whatever the teacher was saying, student was not able to hear that. And then he used to just ping his friend who had a better internet connection that, hey, what did the teacher just say? And imagine that happening for a span of 3 years. The rote learning basically compounds over time. So why this is happening is not the fault of Zoom. It's the fault of how the internet architecture is built so far for communication. So what's happening is that if you're doing a call in India, both you and me, for example, the server is still in North Virginia. So all my audio and video packets are routed through the central server in North Virginia, and then it comes back. Now this is traveling via optic fiber cables via the sea, and the more distance it travels, the more there is heat loss. The more there is heat loss, the more there is robotic voices, latency, jitter, buffer, hey, can you hear me, and all those kind of situations. So to solve that, we have a very simple solution that if I and Nik are in India, Why not have a node or a server in India itself, so that it doesn't have to travel all the way to a different continent and come back? So that's the whole solution. But to build that, you need to think about it in a kind of an Airbnb model, where what is the incentive for this person to run this node? So that's where the whole idea came into picture, and that's where we tested out on our own node POC, and we saw that the latency became much more better. You had a much clearer voice, and you can also do this immersive level kind of calls, where you don't have to just belong to a 2D screen. The calls will become much more immersive, like over time. It will become much more like how we see in Iron Man, right? Like you are doing a holographic kind of call. To do that, you need to have a much robust infrastructure of internet for communication, and that's what we are building with this edge-based network rather than using the cloud-based networks.
Yeah, it's super cool to see it, and I want to get into the hardware. Let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, Gold Hawks and Associates. We're a DePIN consultant firm helping projects with strategy, messaging, and token incentives. We run a blog at goldandhawks.com, produce this show, and most importantly, work with the core teams and communities of your favorite projects in the space to ensure tokenomics and incentives are fully aligned to build out some of the most badass physical infrastructure networks in the world. If your project needs help in any of these, check out goldandhawks.com. So, Ayush, we'll talk maybe a little bit about Golden Hawks later after the show. But for right now, let's focus on what you guys are doing to build the hardware side of the network. I know you've got some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pipe. Are we going to be able to buy these things? Can we build them? How do we get a node?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been working on the node structure for the last 2 years now. My co-founder and CTO Sushmit, along with the whole protocol team. And now the good news is that people will be able to buy the nodes in a month's time. So essentially, the node will have a functionality where essentially you can just switch on the node, and you'll be able to basically become a node provider, and you can just do the call. So imagine that you are doing a kind of video conferencing, and you are earning from that because you don't have to send all the data to Jeff Bezos, and it belongs to you. But you can assemble it as well. So you can have will be launching the specs. So for people who want to just compose and build everything by themselves, they can build that. The specifications are very clear. We'll have that more, but it could be an 8-core kind of CPU, which you'll have. You'll require a 1 Gbps based internet connection, but that's about it. So you'll be able to run that via your own laptop, via a Raspberry Pi, and also via the whole box which we will be providing, which will have a much more better functionality, and also something which will be much more stable for a concurrent based calls, which if you want to do. Yeah.
Super cool. And I believe the white paper is coming out in a couple of weeks, so people can dive into all of this stuff then. But I think the big takeaway here is that this is a pretty cool DePIN that's coming out. It's allowing us to do the things we all do anyway in the manner that DePIN kind of promises, which is decentralized and physical infrastructure. So super cool to see all that. Okay, is there anything else you want to hit? Where should people find you? You guys are over on Twitter at Huddle01.com and then Huddle01.com. Anything else that's going on you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the white paper is coming out, as you mentioned, Nick. The white paper completely talks about the incentive structure. It's something which we've been working for the last 1 year. There's a reason why we never launched a kind of incentive structure over the last 3 years and just building the demand side, is because we have been thinking about it on how to first build demand and then solve supply side of things. So now, since we are ready, we have already clocked more than 3 million minutes of meeting on the demand side, on the app layer, and also on the SDK layer. Now is the time where even if the market is a bull or a bear, people will still run the nodes because they know that there's a lot of demand already out there. And the end game is that we would want that apps like Zoom, some like CPaaSes like Agora and all these things, instead of using these centralized servers, they start using the network, which is people powered at the end of the day. We're also adding these things like Uber-based surge pricing. That means if there are more servers based in India and there's more demand there, basically there'll be a kind of dynamic pricing based on where there's more demand. So it's pretty interesting. People will love it and would love for people to test it out. It should be live in a month's time. Excited for that.
Okay. Super cool. And like I said, I've gotten to use it. It's really cool. I've had a fun time with it. And I'll also say, and it may just be because I was early, but the customer support was awesome on it. I'd be on meetings like, hey, I got this one little problem, and someone would jump in and be like, oh yeah, let me fix that real quick. So you guys are totally hustling on that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that's one of the traits of being a startup.
Yeah, you're always fixing something, making things better. Ripping. Well, dude, there's so much more to talk about with Huddle01. We'll have to have you back on to talk about updates, especially when the hardware ships. But thanks so much for making time. I know as a startup, you're always busting your ass to get everywhere all at once, and I appreciate you carving out some time to share that with us.
Absolutely, Nick. Thanks so much.